Adoption means that you start life with a loss. You lose your mother. And we're trying to get our voices heard in a way that puts the story there for other people who've been adopted. Understanding that in fact it's not me that had the problem. The problem was caused by this loss and grief at the start of life. You come into a family where they've probably lost children, your mother's lost, so all around it's just enormous loss. But for the baby, of course, it's all you've known is living under your mother's heart for 9 months and becoming familiar with her. So everything else in the world is very strange. So that first loss is something that is never referred to again for an adoptee. You're given to a new family and you're expected to be a blank slate for them and fit into their family without a rule book to know how to do it. One of the things about being adopted is you get a false birth certificate. And I've never been able to come to terms with this, that your original birth certificate gets stamped superseded, and you get another birth certificate that names your adoptive parents as your birth parents. And you're stuck with that for life. While I don't have a great deal of animosity towards my adoptive family, they did the best they could in the circumstances, I think, I really am angry that I have a falsified birth certificate and that identifies me for the rest of my life. That first loss sits in the subconscious, and each loss later becomes a bigger event that's harder to resolve. It's only really in the most recent years that I've read and come to understand this disenfranchised grief and the loss that accumulates because you can't resolve the first loss. So I got on and lived my life quite well again after I recovered from my mother's death. More recently, when my adoptive father died, and shortly after that I had 4 of my best friends die within a short time. And truly I didn't know how to get out of bed and keep going. There just didn't seem to be any purpose in life at all anymore. In spite of the fact that I have kids of my own and, I did have other friends, but there's just this total incredible aloneness that I've always felt all my life. Not necessarily alone, but you just feel completely alone because you're missing from where you really should have been early in life. I've been in counselling most of my life, but I started with another service after those friends died and just trying to find how to put things back together again. I gradually felt as though the world wanted us silenced. Nobody wants to talk about the adult life of an adoptee. Adoption is for children. You get adopted as a baby or young child and not sure what's supposed to happen after that. You're supposed to fit into your new family as if they're yours. And I didn't, and a lot of us don't. But this silence around the services where they're quite happy to talk about what happened to the mothers because it was pretty awful the way they were treated. But to talk about adoptees, I think nobody actually knew enough history to know what it was all about. There's a need out there for some recognition of what happens to adoptees after. You kind of feel like if you can get it out there and make people realise that this whole feeling of rejection and abandonment and being alone is part of the adoption experience and it's not part of going mad, which is what you think you're doing at the time. There was the apologies more recently, state government and federal government, apologies for the forced adoptions. And it was really, I think, well, it was definitely aimed at the mothers. The mothers had done all the work to get this apology. And I went to Canberra for the federal apology. And it was the first time I really became aware that we were left out, that nobody was talking about the issues for adoptees. Yeah, we managed to work out the commonalities in our lives that were about adoption, and having got the words on paper then gave us some more confidence to keep going. So we took on the services and we started up a group, and we're now involved. We've put in articles in the Adoption Journal, and we keep putting things out towards it for the media. We had quite a presentation with the Adoption Act review here. So starting to find a voice with that was the way I began to build up confidence again. Yeah. I made contact with my mother again because I had met my birth mother once. I'd met my grandmother a number of times, and my grandmother had given me quite a bit of information about my original family. But I think primarily I was more interested in who my mother was until after my mother had died. My adoptive mother had died, and then I went found that part of the family. And it wasn't until my father died, and he was in his 90s, that I decided that now was the time I had to put in some real effort to try and find my father, which took me out into the Aboriginal communities and really helped me into another way of life then. Yeah, I've really always had a very strong connection to the land, and I've always done my stories and all through land. I've always been a gardener. Everywhere I go, I've planted huge numbers of trees. And, when all else has failed you, in the end, it's Mother Earth. The connection through the earth, getting your feet onto wet ground or into the wet grass, and feeling the energy from the earth, and remembering that all nurturance actually comes from the earth. All of our food, the whole ecosystem that depends on the earth being healthy. So I try to think of my family as, a big wide connection to everybody who's really caring for the earth, caring for the country. I find a lot of strength. I think what we do is kind of telling our own story through our paintings, and where you've got this total absence of story, because you come into the world with your own history, with your ancestry, the family story from your birth, and you go into a family with a different story, and you kind of try to wear it, but it's like bad fitting clothes. It just doesn't work. So what you can do, or what we do through art and through writing, is to create a new story. Some of it's probably mythical, fantasy, but it fills the gap. And as you create the story, you see yourself as a part of it. So it gives a connection, because connection is really important towards feeling healthy and feeling a part of everything that's going on around you. So it's one of my friends said the other day, it's like you write your own story, you develop the strong characters, and then you step into them and live that life. And I think that's pretty much what I've been doing over the last couple of years. So even though I still feel alone, I still will always feel alone, that's part of the adoption stuff, I know that I am connected, and I can give myself a story of connection.